Oh, yo, what up? What's going on? How y'all doing? Hey. Yo, I just wanted to jump on real quick because I saw a video from a media outfit that I really dislike, Daily Wire, and a person in particular named Matt Walsh. I've written something about some of his views and some of the stuff he does, and the ways he makes money. But I want to talk about this video that I just saw. Matt Walsh is responding to Jon Stewart, okay? The famed, legendary Jon Stewart, who has a show on Apple TV. So, to me, it's about 20 minutes long. He's going off. It's about Jon Stewart had an episode about gender, and about the complexity of gender, and Matt Walsh is responding to that video. Okay, so let me just flip over to this guy. There we go. All right. Make sure this is on. So, again, he's responding to the video. Let's. I think he sets it up actually. So we'll just jump in.
Well, last week was, you might say, eventful. It began with three major medical organizations calling for the prosecution.
Wait, hold on. All right, here we go.
Of high-profile social media personalities. Well, last week was, you might say, eventful. It began with three major medical organizations calling for the prosecution of high-profile social media personalities who have been reporting on and criticizing so-called gender-affirming care, having extremely well-funded and powerful medical associations not so subtly single me out and call for my arrest would have been enough activity for 1 week, as far as I'm concerned. But very next day, Media Matters launched their most extensive hit piece against me yet in a transparent attempt to derail our campaign against gender ideology. And while this was all going on, we were also in the first week of our What is a Woman college tour, where throngs of protesters complained that my presence was destabilizing their existence and responded by defiantly singing Bohemian Rhapsody in a vocal performance that resembled the sound of 7,000 chickens choking to death all at once. And
okay, so in the beginning of this thing, his whole thing is, right out the breaks, he's a victim. He's a victim. He's being victimized. Look at all these things. Look how they're mobilizing against me. You know what I'm saying? Victim. Oh, I did this, and people showed up and didn't like what I said, and a medical association has denounced me. Who cares? People are denouncing you because your views are harmful and you don't know what you're talking about. And you've built a platform on this and you're doing documentaries on this. The same for the people who are showing up at the places where you speak. I think that we all have the right to speak, and I think that he has a right to speak, but the people who show up also have a right to be there. And at the end of the day, Matt should be able to speak and say his nonsense. We should be able to critique his nonsense. The greatest disinfectant is sunlight, and that's what this video is about. I watched just a little bit of it, and then I said, I need to get on this motherfucker and talk about it real quick because it just got under my skin, some of it. Some of the very conscious ways that he's playing in this space. A very serious conversation that, hello. A very serious conversation that is, deserves some serious attention. Not this, okay? So here we go.
Single me out and call for my arrest would have been enough activity for 1 week, as far as I'm concerned. But very next day, Media Matters launched their most extensive hit piece against me yet in a transparent attempt to derail our campaign against gender ideology. And while this was all going on, we were also in the first week of our What is a Woman college tour, where throngs of protesters complained that my presence was destabilizing their existence and responded by defiantly singing Bohemian Rhapsody in a vocal performance that resembled the sound of 7,000 chickens choking to death all at once. And then came the big win on Friday, the capstone to all these events. At the end of a week where I think our enemies thought that they'd landed a knockout blow, it was announced by Vanderbilt in a letter to state lawmakers that they would be pausing all gender transition procedures on minors. So they caved. They surrendered. For perhaps the first time in recent memory, anyway, a left-wing institution caved to pressure from the right. Very rarely does that happen.
What is he talking about? What is he talking about? Here's the first thing, straight up. Everything from Daily Wire, they use language like right and left, slippery, useless language like this because they know that they don't ever attempt to explain or like ascertain what those words mean to them. So the first time a right institution won something, what are you talking about? In labor disputes, in the history of labor disputes in America, the right never wins any of these things. This ongoing process. What is he describing exactly? it's just a nonsense claim, and it adds to the victim nonsense.
We beat them. Battle's not close to over. The fight continues, of course, as we now move on to make gender transitions. That happen. We beat them. A left-wing institution caved. So they caved. They surrendered. For perhaps the first time in recent memory, anyway, a left-wing institution caved to pressure from the right. Very rarely does that happen. But we beat them. Battle's not close to over. The fight continues, of course, as we now move on to make gender transitions on minors illegal across the entire state, and then we move across the entire country. But this was a major victory, and I think perhaps in some ways unprecedented. And we'll have much more to say.
In some ways unprecedented. What is he talking about? I'd love for him to get further into that. Maybe he'll respond to this. I'd like to know what's unprecedented about what just occurred.
Say about it in a few minutes, but the week was not over with the Vanderbilt news. That night, Jon Stewart opened the second season of his Apple TV show. Even though nobody watched the first season, he got the second season anyway. A little bit more of that left-wing privilege that he's benefiting from. Most people didn't even know that the first season happened, but it did.
Left-wing privilege. He's a victim again. Dad, he's such a victim. His identity as a right-wing guy comes with that. It's embedded in it, a victimhood mentality. So the fact that Jon Stewart has an illustrious career has nothing to do with his talent and what he does on camera, how smart he is, and how funny he is and poignant he is. He has more talent than you, and you can't stand it. It's really because of some left-wing privilege. What a victim.
Nobody watched the first season. He got the second season anyway. A little bit more of that left-wing privilege that he's benefiting from. Most people didn't even know that the first season happened, but it did. Season 2, episode 1 comes along and focuses on the topic of gender. It is, in effect, Jon Stewart's response to our documentary, What is a Woman, and even features a brief clip of the film. The left has hailed this episode as the ultimate takedown of the conservative conspiracy theory that women don't have penises.
The left has... Let's listen to that again.
As the ultimate takedown of the documentary, What is a Woman, and even features a brief clip of the film. The left has hailed this episode as the ultimate takedown of the conservative conspiracy theory that women don't have penises. It just demolishes all of us, we're told.
What is he talking about here? Who's the left says this? Who is that? What is the body or the person? What certifying place is the left that has said that this is the takedown, whatever? See, but y'all love that. You're like, oh, he said it. Oh, it's the left.
So to begin the show today, we're going to go through what are being celebrated as the most compelling and persuasive moments from this episode. And we will show that Jon Stewart is a shallow, spineless left-wing hack who has long had the reputation as a free thinker and a sort of bold comedic mind, even though he has always simply adopted the mainstream corporate position on literally every topic. And that's what he's done now on gender.
What is he talking about? Jon Stewart, most recently, he's been involved with trying to get the first responders health benefits or whatever they needed after 9/11. He embarrassed Matt Walsh's guy, Tucker Carlson. He embarrasses Tucker Carlson every time they have an interaction. Several years ago, he embarrassed Tucker Carlson on air and made a bold, hilarious, embarrassing critique of the mainstream media at large in general. The same mainstream media that Matt Walsh and the people at the Daily Wire get excited to get on when they get with Fox News to sit across from Tucker Carlson, the embarrassed, the loser, the actor, Tucker Carlson. That's not a mainstream position, what Jon Stewart did and what the critique he made of the media. He talked about the mainstream media's role, constitutional role, and how they're failing to hold people to power, hold people in power to account, to be responsible to their constituency, and the role of money in politics and how that all plays into the media. That's what Jon Stewart did. While this dude works hard to get on Fox News, wants to be Fox News so bad.
So we start with a clip shared by the show's Twitter account, and the caption of this clip on their Twitter account was, "What is a woman? It's a question that suddenly is everywhere. It turns out the answer is complicated." Jon breaks down the gender binary and gender spectrum in this week's episode.
We are in a new dawn of gender and sex complexity, where those who don't fit into a simple binary are meant to be seen with humanity. It wasn't always like this, people. As recently as, let's say, the 1990s, early 2000s, people were making reductive jokes about the subject. What can I say? The joke rhymed.
It would be sad to see Jon Stewart apologizing for his past jokes, disavowing his previous belief that men can't have babies, and groveling for acceptance from a bunch of purple-haired 22-year-olds. But you must realize that Jon Stewart has always been a pathetic fraud. This is fully in keeping with his brand. It's still a sickening, stomach-churning display of self-debasement as...
What is self-churning and debasing about growing and having a different view with new information and access to a greater, more diverse set of facts and truths? You know, one of the problems for people like this guy is every single day, all of our different branches of knowledge are converging on a deeper understanding of the human expression and the human experience. And every single day, his position is going to get dwindled. And people like him, the people who want to define humanity in a very, very narrow way, want to define normal in a very narrow way. And these definitions are important to them because they need them for exclusion. They need them to define the terms of exclusion, the in-group and the out-group, and the people who get to participate. Matt Walsh, make no mistake, is the modern incarnation. He is the descendant of the people who wanted to make sure that whatever was going on, whatever the social structure was before of Jim Crow, the Jim Crow South, or discretionary housing in Chicago, or around the world, around America, I should say, around the US. Matt Walsh is committed to keeping things as they are. You know what I'm saying? To grow and have a greater understanding of humanity is a challenge for him, because especially now that he's built up a career, a short-lived career, I'm sure, because this is happening faster and faster every day. The community of people who are willing to exclude and not listen and commit themselves to old ideas is dwindling.
Revolting and perverse as watching someone eat themselves on camera, but it's exactly what you ought to expect from a lifelong shill. Let's continue.
Lifelong shill.
Any moment of progressive visibility will be met with a vicious backlash.
There are two genders. There are two genders, and everyone knows it.
Ain't but two genders.
That last guy sounded like it's an emergency and we're running out of genders. Everyone, there ain't but two genders.
So here you see the attempt to make a completely self-evident and obvious statement seem absurd. The audience, with the enhancement of a laugh track, giggles at the statement that there are only two genders. Like, this is the move. If you just laugh at something, then that automatically makes it laughable, expecting us to believe that the claim is funny just because they're laughing at it. But they can't make this objectively correct statement funny by laughing about it any more than they can make a statement like, the world is round, or Jon Stewart is a gutless, smirking slug funny by laughing about it.
Okay, so I think this is a good time to say what I think is going on here, okay? The word gender is related, gender as I see it, relates to an overlay, an interface, a social category. It's a social construct. Man and woman, these are things that people grow into. These are things that people become. They come with traits. They come with expectations. They come with assumptions. Even if Matt Walsh is not defining it this way, he is intentionally failing to accept and understand that the people on the other side are talking about it this way. The people who are themselves experiencing life, call it gender dysphoria, people who are trying to describe their experience. I don't know if that word fits in all cases, but that this is what they're talking about. Matt Walsh intentionally, with his documentary, What is a Woman, and with all of his media, they go back and forth. They play with the fact that there is a biology, there's language we use that refers to biology. There are male and female categories, which to me are biological categories. They relate to the size, let's say, of the gametes in the body of the person. And even there's some complexity, but it seems that biology, male and female, seem to be of greater, it seems to be a more sturdy place to talk about them in a binary. But gender relates to the social relationship. Gender relates to a set of norms, expectations, and assumptions that we carry out and enforce and engage in with each other. And so the people who are trying to expand our definition and our understanding of gender are saying to you, I don't feel comfortable that I have to perform these sets of behaviors. That if I'm a boy, I have to wear a dress. If I'm a boy, I have to wear pants. If I'm a girl, I have to wear a dress. Men can be more aggressive in certain ways. Women are expected to be less so and be dainty. Women are expected to be interested in domestic tasks. Women are expected to be nurturing and want children. Even in their older age, if a woman doesn't have children, this kind of critique that men don't have. Women are expected to, that is the life purpose of a woman. That is what a woman should, what else have you done with your life if not to produce a child, kind of thing. That is what's at question. These assumptions, some people, I walk into a room, I don't struggle with these gender binaries. I can dress and be this way. It feels very natural to me. It's fine for me. People shake my hand and dap me up. I often will hug a woman, especially if she's very feminine presenting. I hug her. I dap up boys. This is just dudes. This is just a way that I am, and I'm not alone in this. And so I'm going to continue playing this thing, but it's important to recognize throughout this whole thing here, there is something related to biology that we might call male and female. Male and female, that there's something related to biology that we might call male and female. We might say that there's something that's a different conversation is what I want to say. Okay, because I'm actually not an expert in that field. I'm actually very much interested in and well versed in linguistics, however, and sociology. And it's important to separate terms that have biological nature, such as male, female, from man and woman, okay? Which is why we say things like be a man, act like a woman, act like a lady, act like a man. We have other words that separate. When someone isn't acting like a man, we call them a punk. Someone isn't acting like a woman, we might call her a slut. If she isn't acting in the norms of the woman, of the terms that we expect for women. And that comes with different advantages and privileges and also different burdens. So it's a very complex thing, and Matt is relying on people having limited language and limited understanding. But again, things are changing. The conversation is growing. He's going to have a hard time keeping this up.
These are all just simply objective, self-evident observations about the physical world. It's really not funny at all, but let's continue along.
The point is clear. The human race is defined by a simple binary, a black and white understanding. There are men and there are women, and never the twain shall meet.
Trump is an alpha male.
Well, okay, yes, there are obviously men who are more man than other men, but that's an aberration.
Beta, gamma.
Okay, there's an entire Greek alphabet, a continuum of masculinity, but that doesn't mean...
Cock, pajama boy, soy boy.
Girly man.
I hope the children are out of the room. Clearly, masculinity appears to be on a dimmer, not an on-off switch, but ladies are different.
I was a big tomboy.
These purple-haired angry freaks.
Rabid feminist.
Cat lady.
High rolling bimbos.
Pretty girly girl.
My God, what a cruise line buffet of the gradients in American gender expression. Turns out there's a lot of non-binary happening between the binaries.
This is John's whole shtick, by the way. It goes back to the Daily Show. Just play a clip of someone saying something normal and then mug for the camera like it's an episode of The Office. Someone says something normal and you look at the camera like, and then that's the joke. Like, automatically, that thing is now fun. But these are all just descriptions of personality traits, and most of them are labels used to describe the same sorts of people. So, how does this at all, even slightly, call into question the existence of the man-woman binary?
So, again, it doesn't call into question the existence of the man-woman binary. It simply points out that the label, the word man and the word woman, are words that were constructed in a social context to describe people, and that those social words were overlaid on the biological reality underneath. Those words describe that, but that in between, there's a range, is the point. There's a range both in the male and the female expression. And again, this goes back to what we're talking about. It's important to realize that we are talking about expression. There's countless videos, or not countless, several videos on this very channel with Daily Wire where they are mocking people who express differently. They're mocking people in dresses who they feel should be dressed differently. That's their whole thing.
Nobody ever said, John, that every man is exactly the same as every other man, or that every woman is the same as every other woman. Squares can also come in many different shapes and colors, and rather many different sizes and colors, not shapes. That's the point. A square is still a square, so you can color a different color. You can have
a square is still a square, he says.
Big square, a little square. There are lots of different ways you can describe squares depending on how you decorate them, but a square is still a square.
So right there, it's so funny. Depending on how you decorate them, a square is still a square. I actually think that that's right. The truth is that the word square is a word that we've given to a specific shape. And yes, you can decorate them however you wish. Then tell me, why does Matt have issue with people who decorate themselves differently than he assumes that they should? Why is there so much content on the Daily Wire? And why is even, some of these guys have talked about this in fashion in particular. Why does he have a concern with that at all? Why did, what's that dude, man? Candace Owens and them want them to dress more masculine, be more masculine. Is he gonna stop saying that? Is this requirement for more masculine dressing and masculine presentation, is that over based on what Matt Walsh just said? Because a square is still a square? Let's listen to it again.
Call into question the existence of the man-woman binary. Nobody ever said, John, that every man is exactly the same as every other man, or that every woman is the same as every other woman. Squares can also come in many different shapes and colors, and rather many different sizes and colors, not shapes. That's the point. A square is still a square, so you can color a different color. You can have a big square, a little square. There are lots of different ways you can describe squares depending on how you decorate them, but a square is still a square. You can do a lot of interesting things with a square. You can't make it a circle, is the point. So is that really the best that Stewart can do? Just like pointing out that there are different personality traits, different ways that you can describe individual men, different insults you can use against individual women? Is that it? Is that all you have? Is that what the left considers some kind of definitive smack?
One of the things is that, Baby, what's up? Baby's actually messaging here. Sheebs was good. Yes, she says, he seems jealous that he's not as funny as creative as Jon Stewart. Correct. He's also, the biology categories used continue to expand. Human biology also isn't binary, meaning only two of something. Correct. Plus, a square can be turned into a triangle if you rearrange the lines. That's true. Be turned into, I can see two triangles with another line. Also, so Sheba says you can absolutely make a square into a circle. I don't. So this is we're gonna get into geometry, which I don't. That's not my thing. But in my mind, I don't know. I know I can massage it if I have the right program. I can massage the pixels on a square and turn it into a circle for sure. But see, all this complexity exists in this thing. When he says you can't be a square or a square can't be a circle, Sheebs, I don't know how you'll describe that. You say that you can turn it into a square. For me, I know that I can through Photoshop. Let's say. I know that I can if I add a lot more on the square. There are 4 points. If I add more points to the square and then spread them out, in a circular fashion, all these points can become a circle. That's something I can do in Blender. So exactly, what medium is he talking? We're using pencil or clay. Exactly. See, it's very facile. He's actually not smart at all. The people at Daily Wire, him, Ben Shapiro. Unfortunately, I want to say that Jordan Peterson has a space of intellect that I appreciate, that he shows occasionally, but less and less so every day. More recently, particularly as he's teamed up with Daily Wire, he's really sort of, I think, debased a lot of the good work that he's done, because that work still exists and still stands, and some of it was helpful for me in terms of understanding, like, taking action in life and masculine in terms of this. But more and more they're in this, feels to me like a cash grab, this Daily Wire nonsense. They've got a Daily Wire Plus service. It's like CNN Plus, but way stupider, And let's continue.
Backdown of the gender binary? Surely he must have more in his arsenal. He doesn't, of course, but we'll keep watching anyway.
All right, so far we're at 9 minutes, and he really hasn't said anything. He hasn't said anything really or critiqued John in a way that is impressive or honest at all. From the very jump, he said that John is a shill for mainstream, blah, blah, blah. Completely untrue. His position is to try to position himself as some rogue rebel who's being critiqued by the mainstream. He isn't that.
That hasn't stopped the traditionalists from deploying their newest weapon in the culture war arsenal, the obvious gotcha question.
The real basic question, what is a woman?
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
For all of recorded history, people have known what a woman is.
Yes! All of recorded history! It was simple. Until like a year ago. The answer to what is a woman has always been the same. It's a woman is a deformity that occurred in the ordinary course of nature. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's Aristotle. I apologize. I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. I meant a woman is a person who has no legal existence once married. That's early American coverture law. That's not right. No, throughout history, it's not a gotcha question. A woman is 30 shekels. I'm sorry, that's Leviticus.
I wonder what he's going to say here, but I just want to say straight away what Jon Stewart did there so brilliantly was point out how the legal frameworks, the religious frameworks, whatever power structures existed at the time, were the ones who got to make definitions, used to contrive from thin air definitions to describe and then discriminate against a group that they called woman. That's the underlying point there.
Yes, John, those are different things that different people and institutions have said about women over the course of history, but what is your point? Aristotle and the author of Leviticus and everyone else that you might name from ancient history all agreed on what a woman is fundamentally and physically. They all agreed that a woman can be defined because if they didn't, then they couldn't have said anything about women in the first place. See, John, that's what you're not understanding it. You can't even talk about them. You can't say anything about them at all unless there's some shared understanding of what this entity is.
See, right here, when he does this is why it's very careful and very important to listen to the language again. He uses this language in a slippery way. He's describing what I think he wants to call female. We can point to something called a human female, and we can attempt to describe it. And the historical power structures in human civilizations have attempted to do that, and they've set up our societies that way. And that is the social understanding that is at the heart of the question. Female and male are biological conversations that relate to several things. Again, it's complex there again. People will say, earlier he said, women can have a penis. So it could be as simple as a penis. It could be the best, most scientific, medical term, medical definition I've seen relates to the size of the gamete. It's either an egg or sperm. And at every phase, there were power structure and powerful people who were looking to extract privilege and to externalize harm, and the men, we can go talk to people to understand why this is, but it seems possibly just related to like physical strength. I don't know. The male population had quite often the capacity to develop these social norms and these labels, which we call man and woman, and which in the present day we're having a very big discussion to expand that understanding about what kinds of expectations and assumptions we should have of each other, if there is any proper correlation between someone's gamete size in their body and whether or not they like certain colors or not, whether or not they can, whether or not they should be rough and rumble, if they should be domestic, if they have the lacks and the freedom to be promiscuous, to be sex positive is the right word. which we all know men get this pass because in the social space we've given this privilege to people who have the gamete size, the gamete sperm. It makes no sense, but that's what it's been, and that's how it's been. And so he has that advantage. He's going to try to argue things that are simply what they've been for no logical or sensible or moral reason, and he's going to lean on that and say how absurd that you would chastise something that's just been. But can he actually defend it and say that it needs to continue as it does?
You know, in 2020, there were over 1,000 significant online data breaches in the U.S., which left almost 156 million people's records exposed. That was all in 1 year. That includes sensitive information related to your children. Now, you wouldn't let your kids walk home from school without telling them not to talk to strangers or get into any windowless vans, but you let them go online every day without a VPN.
So instead of doing like an ad
they go online, you've got to
thing,
express VPN. Internet service providers know every single website you visit. ISPs,
these dudes will do, they just have a back-end system with ExpressVPN or whatever, and they'll, in the middle of stuff, they'll just stop and start talking about, you know, acne cream or butt plugs, stuff like this. This is their thing. They've got some, I guess they don't, this way they have a direct thing, so they get more of the cut or something. You gotta make your money, Daily Wire, do your thing, yo. But I think it's goofy to do this, to cut the video like that. They actually had a transition. Sometimes Brian, what's his name? Sometimes Ben doesn't even do a transition. He just like turns over. He's over here talking, and I hate, and I'm the victim, and the left, and the left, and the left, and the right. And then he'll go, do you have anal butts in your butt? You know, some weird nonsense. You're like, what? Why are you doing this? Why don't you have an ad thing happen rather than this? Why do you have to? And he's like, oh, and I use this product.
Over history, people have had different ideas about the legal.
Hold on, I got the volume down.
Place in society.
All right, let's go back.
Different ideas. .com/Matt Walsh Show today. Use my link and you can get an extra 3 months free. ExpressVPN.com/Matt Walsh Show. ExpressVPN.com/Matt Walsh Show. What you're proving is that over history, people have had different ideas about the legal standing of women, about their place in society, and so on and so on. But you haven't.
Wait, do you see how he says that? People have had different ideas about the legal standing of women. Why would women have a separate legal standing? Why did anyone have ideas about a separate legal standing for women? He doesn't address that. I doubt that he addresses that. He just wants you to know that that's what it was. Made sense. That's what they were doing at the time. And you're just pointing that out. Well, guess what? Yeah, we're pointing that out. That's the whole thing. The legal standings. The fact that I don't have a risk of being banned from having an important surgery that might be important for me, or having angry people screaming outside telling me nonsense and lying to me so that I can't get a surgery that I need. This is a truth for women, however. And that truth, that separation, that oppression is wholly predicated on this absurd separation that you have constructed, Matt, you and your friends. Maybe you didn't construct it, you inherited it, because you're not that clever. You're not that creative, actually. You inherited it, and you're just defending it. And so you're not impressive to me.
Prove that there was ever, at any time, ever in history, ever until just now, even the slightest disagreement on the definition of the word. No, indeed, you've proven the opposite, if anything. I mean, there are people who would say different things about Jon Stewart. Some people would say he's a comedic genius. On the other hand, people with functioning brains say that he's a bland, boring chump, desperate for approval. These are all adjectives, some of them more accurate.
That's who he is, though. Do you see how it's like, it's a direct reflection, projection is the word.
Than others. They don't make Jon Stewart into some kind of abstract, undefinable entity whose very objective existence is now up for debate.
No. But no one's making that case either. Do you see these little tricks, these rhetorical tricks? No one's making that case. The truth is that, as we've discussed, gender as a social construct, as a framework of legal categorization and assumptions and expectations, those are made up. Those are constructed and fluid and often imbued with power. And what people are asserting, some of the best people to articulate this that I'm familiar with, people who have, like Alok, V. Menon, that there's a fluidity there. And so you can be the best this in one day, and then tomorrow you can be something else, and that you can choose that. And that the expectations you have of the person when you see them, you are always just a bit late. You're always just a bit behind. And you're always, sometimes it's worse than behind. You're constructing it completely from your own experience and your own limitations, your own ignorance, your own assumptions, your own attachments. And that this person that you're observing has no commitment or attachment to that, and has no requirement to make you feel comfortable. That's the challenge you're having, Matt. And you're going to keep having it.
But Stewart isn't done here. He also interviews Leslie Rutledge, who's the Arkansas Attorney General and a great American who's helped to spearhead the efforts in her state to make it illegal to sexually mutilate children. Yet, not every great American is necessarily equipped to successfully respond to a partisan hack like Stewart.
So I think it's funny. Here we have the state stepping in. By the way, Matt Walsh, when he's at parties, he likes to tell people that he's libertarian in his orientation. But here is a clear example where it's okay for the state to step in and make illegal a medical procedure. I don't know exactly what we're talking about here, to be honest. I'm gonna be clear that I don't know this law that he's describing, but he's trying to describe a condition where the state would be able to step in and make illegal something like this. And I wonder how a libertarian can hold that view, right? You have to be sort of mentally not fully there to hold these two contradictory views, that you're also someone who's concerned with the dangers of big government, you know?
While the cameras are rolling, okay? Not everyone is going to be good in that context, and his very objective existence is now up for debate. But Stewart isn't done here. He also interviews Leslie Rutledge, who's the Arkansas Attorney General and a great American who's helped to spearhead the efforts in her state to make it illegal to sexually mutilate children. Yet, not every great American is necessarily equipped to successfully respond to a partisan hack like Stewart while the cameras are rolling, okay? Not everyone is going to be good in that context. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Rutledge really is, which is exactly why she was chosen for this segment. But let's watch a little bit of this.
Unbelievable.
Why?
Hold on. His whole movie is based on that. He walks around the country and around the world, even in different parts of the world, and sits down with different people who struggle to answer his questions. Does he do the same? Does he have the same leniency and the same love and the same compassion and understanding that some people might not be great in front of the camera? Maybe some people aren't the best articulators of the point of view, and to understand that. And so after every interview, kind of go, well, I'm sure there's a better argument out there. That's what he should have done in his movie, right? Instead, he has all these clips where he's mocking people, and he's showing, in some cases, it looks like, yeah, it seems like people are stumped in some cases. Does he go afterwards? I'm sure there are better arguments, but we couldn't get, you know what I mean? No, he has a hard, fast opinion, and he's propagating it through his stupid movie.
Why would the state of Arkansas step in to override parents, physicians, psychiatrists, endocrinologists who have developed guidelines? Why would you override those guidelines?
Well, I think it's important that all of those physicians, all of those experts, for every single one of them, there's an expert that says we don't need to allow children to be able to take those medications. That there are many instances where...
But you know that's not true. You know it's not for everyone. There's one. These are the established...
Well, I don't know that that's not true. I don't know that...
Then why would you pass a law then if you don't know that that's true? Wouldn't you?
Well, I know that there are doctors, and that we had plenty of people come and testify before our legislature who said that we have 98% of the young people who have gender dysphoria, that they are able to move past that, and once they have the help that they need, no longer suffer from gender dysphoria. 98% without that medical treatment.
That's an incredibly made-up figure. That doesn't comport with any of the studies or documentation that exists from these medical organizations. What medical association are you talking about of these doctors?
Well, we have all of that in our legislative history, and we'll be glad to provide that to you.
Okay. Jon Stewart was, of course, extremely careful about which conservative he invited to speak to him about this issue. I don't think I'm inflating myself in any respect by saying that I am primarily the one who's brought the what is a woman question to the forefront, and yet Stewart didn't reach out to me for an interview.
Here's the thing. Jon Stewart responds to what is a woman. Let me just point out how much of a grift loser he is. Jon Stewart is not responding to his loser movie, just because he used a clip, why didn't he say Jon Stewart is responding to C-SPAN? He got C-SPAN clips in there as well. Jon Stewart is not responding to this person. I'm responding to him. Jon Stewart has better things to do. And yeah, maybe he could have put on a somebody who is better at the pugilist sort of discussion. Maybe it should have been you, Matt. I hope you have that same understanding when you speak to other people on the street and ask them questions like, what is a woman, and expect them to have a cogent, thought out answer.
If he had, I would have eagerly accepted. And here's how I would have responded. Instead of making the mistake of getting into a credentialism contest, as Rutledge does here, takes the bait. Once you do that, it's over. Okay, that's all this conversation is now. I would have said something like this. John, you're coming out of the gate with appeals to authority because you don't have any thoughts of your own. That's the first problem. There was a time when a similar appeal to authority could have been used to prove that the earth is the center of the universe, or that bloodletting is the cure for every known disease. Okay, there was a time when every medical expert in the world would have told you that if you want to cure any disease, cut yourself open and bleed it out. In this case, your brainless appeals to authority are even more asinine because the authorities you mention all have an obvious financial stake in the very medical practices you're seeking to justify. So what you're telling me is that people who...
So let me just point out real quick. He says that Jon Stewart is making appeals to authority, and I think there's some truth to that. There's some, like, that at least that segment right there was a conversation about the authoritative understanding, okay? That's what that segment was. That's not the entirety of Jon's claim. In fact, the earlier claim I'm really interested in, the stuff he was doing earlier. I wonder why Mr. Walsh didn't show the fullness of that, right? Just before the stupid commercial break that he did, whatever VPN. He doesn't like authority, and yet he doesn't realize that the same people who were doing bloodletting, right? They were requiring that nurses had to be women, or that women couldn't be doctors at that time. They had other ideas about what womanhood looks like and how women should behave and how women should dress. I saw a newspaper clipping on Facebook of a woman. Was she an attorney herself? No, she was, I think, going to court for something, and she was in pants at the courtroom, and she got kicked out of the courtroom twice. And the judge said that she was indecent with her clothing, that she wasn't, she needs to be looking feminine. She's a very feminine woman. She looked feminine, to the picture, but she was wearing pants. So these are the people that Matt relies on and looks for confirmation that he's correct. These are the authorities of the past, the people who set the terms and norms and carried out and enforced these things in the past. That makes him feel that he's right. So he's not absolved from appeals to authority. These are not his original ideas either. What a clown, yo. Unbelievable. I'm old enough that, I was born in 82. I'm old enough to remember, right now, women wear tights, walking around wearing tights and leggings, you know what I'm saying? That was not the case. I'm old enough to remember in the 90s when women started to wear that, there was a big public debate in the New York Times, in the newspapers, in the Daily News. I'm from New York. About women wearing leggings and being able to see their form and their shape, their legs and their butt, and the moral hazard that that's going to bring. And that, I don't know if there wasn't calls for law, but for any laws being instated, but there were definitely, it was a conversation. How absurd. And we know that if we go another 50 years back, corsets and the women's bathing suits, these were all enforced. These were all meaningful encroachments on women at the time. Does Matt realize that? Everything I've just described and much more were meaningful encroachments on the experience that people who fell into the women quarter category had. It was meaningfully, a part of their capacity to be free and to live enriched lives. Note also that women couldn't have access to financial accounts in banks until the mid-70s. That women could be discriminated that way and they had to get their husbands. And so a woman who could not get married, who could not secure a man, was also financially insecure. She couldn't start a business. She couldn't rent out a place on her own. Damn, that's crazy. Can you imagine that? It wasn't so long ago. And those experiences were artificially, improperly, immorally overlaid. Those expectations and assumptions were overlaid on top of our experience with women in society. And it was part of the, if you put yourself in the shoes of the woman, to be that. Could you imagine that? Matt, could you imagine living in a society where weird-looking white men couldn't access a bank account unless they were married? Wouldn't be good for you, bro. So I wouldn't want that world, actually. And of course, we don't have that world now, but we still have stuff. That is the meaningful thing. We still have social expectations that run the gamut from domestication to modes of being in the workplace to fashion and dress. And again, non-binary people are attempting to soften those lines and those walls and to allow us to express freely without those strictures. And that's really all that it is.
Who make millions of dollars mutilating kids all say it's a good idea to mutilate. Brainless appeals to authority are even more asinine because the authorities you mention all have an obvious financial stake in the very medical practices you're seeking to justify. So what you're telling me is that people who make millions of dollars mutilating kids all say it's a good idea to mutilate kids. Wow, breaking news.
Here's a problem, right? When you're dealing with an idiot. So the question is about the validity of non-binary gender, or the validity of expressions of gender labels and discourse outside of man and woman. And now he's reduced it to mutilating kids, How gross, how grotesque. This is supposed to be a smart person. This is supposed to be one of the intellectual leaders of this supposed right wing. None of this conversation is honest. And it also turns very disgusting here as he takes what we were talking about and goes into the gutter and calls it.
Me is that people who make millions of dollars mutilating kids all say it's a good idea to mutilate kids.
The medical community says that our constructions of gender are more malleable than we know. I'll be honest, man, as much as I'm an advocate and I'd like to be, an ally on what I think is an obvious truth, I'm not an ally to the LGBTQ community or the transgender. It's like I'm an ally to the reality of human expression. That's my allyship, to the reality of human experience, right? That not everybody has to put on a plaid shirt and glasses and look like you in order to be validated, On the question of surgery, particularly for minors, Sheba and I have had some conversations, yo. Sheba's my wife. We go back and forth on this, and I have questions, but that's not central. It's not central to this conversation. That's a sideshow, and it's also a tiny percentage of how this conversation is playing out in society. But it is an easy and quick way for Matt to warp everything. So he's going to use it.
Wow, breaking news. The tobacco industry also has funded studies showing that smoking isn't so bad for you. Will you be citing those on your next show, John? Well, this is all beside the point.
See, but for instance, he'll cite stuff from Exxon and in terms of climate change.
The burden of proof is not on me to explain to you why we shouldn't castrate and sterilize children. You guys are the ones coming along out of nowhere demanding that we start engaging in those kinds of horrific practices.
No, that's not what's happening. And it's important for people who are his fans to understand this. There are the expression, the way that this challenging moment of mainstreaming something that's always been in existence, That's what this challenging moment is. It's not even like, oh, new transgenders, that there's some difference going on. Again, this isn't biological. The challenge of human expression has always been there. It's always been met with resistance. There's always been some conservative who had a sense of how things should be. Major League Baseball. Ooh, think of our records. Think of the league if we let black people in. All the slaves. We can't let black people be citizens. Are you kidding me? They're not human. Women can't have bank accounts. Are you kidding me? They can't own businesses or be in the workplace. They're gonna make my dick hard. And they're not smart enough. Also, they're not smart enough. We're the smart guys, right? The ones with the dicks. We're smart. So that's what Matt and those guys do. They sit around a room and posture and smoke cigars. Because that's how you perform masculinity. And they want you to perform it correctly too.
So you tell me what your evidence is. What studies are you talking about? Tell me, John, which credible long-term studies prove that it's a good idea to castrate and mutilate kids? Which ones? Which ones?
See, again.
Here, I'll help you. There are none. They don't exist. These medical institutions don't have studies to support their practices. Our kids are the study. This current generation is the guinea pig, the lab rats. That's the part you're leaving out, you sycophantic gas bag. Now, I'd like to say that this...
He's a clown, you know? I think that there's a conversation to be had about, first off, gender affirming care is another broad thing rather than a narrow, small thing that he's trying to pinhold it as, but because he's intellectually deficient and manipulative, he's warping it this way. Gender affirming care is a much broader category of psychological care, down to, more invasive measures, and I think there is a conversation to be had, particularly on the question of minors, for instance. Okay, but that's not even close to the breadth of what's happening in the world and the expression and the manifestation of this moment. Mainstreaming a human phenomena, a truth, and allowing for that expression, and through doing that, like incorporating a greater understanding of the human experience. Matt likes a narrow, dumb, unjustifiable set of norms about the human expression. That's his underlying goal, and that's why he's doing this. That's why he's warping everything. That's why he, Jon Stewart, that show is a long episode they typically do. That's why he's carved out a good argument and said nothing to it, and he's carved out a lot of other good stuff that I'm gonna have to watch later.
This conversation progresses from here, but it really doesn't. Stewart spends the entire interview obsessing over the guidelines of medical organizations. That's the only thing they talk about. So, well, this organization said we should do it, so we should.
No, so earlier he said the whole thing was about the different personalities, is what he said. Just FYI. Earlier he said the whole episode over and over, oh, those are personalities. Now he says that the whole episode is about credentialing. I might go watch that another time.
That's literally all he has. That's it. His whole case comes down to, these people said we should castrate kids. Which people? Well, the people who make...
You see that? I think we have such a crass and messed up place where, and I'm down for curse words. I'm not approved by any stretch, but I really dislike people who intentionally manipulate language like this. He knows that the very phrasing of castrate kids is particularly in some willy-nilly fashion, is the way that he's organized the imagery. That's gonna cause some pause and cause people to be upset. And it just isn't the case at all. It's a shame. Again, gender affirming care includes psychology. It includes lots of other things. And it seems to me that the medical community, in cahoots, and I say cahoots as in these are the mergers of the best that we understand. The medical community, with its challenge to understand the body, and the psychological community, and other disciplines are merging at this understanding that it's all kind of one thing, you know, and it expresses differently. Call it, it's all one thing and it expresses differently and separately. And that the real challenge, Matt, for mentally unwell people like you is that you can't see the reality, which is that we're all one, and in fact, you know, all these divisions are in fact only distinctions and should be kept at that level so that we can appreciate them and not try to diminish each other and cause harm for each other.
Billions of dollars doing it? Oh, great, good to know. He also lies, of course, and misrepresents the data. Let's check that out.
Shiva says the experts, these are established, peer-reviewed, evolving medical care practices. The experts providing care who we trust to provide care for children in all other ways without issue conclude that at this time, gender-affirming care is the best practice. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, like the Holy Trinity, all one thing, different expressions. There we go. Like the Holy Trinity, all one thing with different expressions. See, and the thing about it is, so what you said here is the experts thing. This is still an appeal to authority, in my, you know, but it's actually such a powerful authority that merges with. It's not just like doctors, like he's saying that want to. It's just anyway. Let's move forward.
I've got some bad news for you. Parents with children who have gender dysphoria have lost children to suicide and depression
They absolutely
because it's
have.
acute. And so these mainstream medical organizations have developed guidelines through peer-reviewed data and studies. And through those guidelines, they've improved mental health outcomes.
What data is that, John? What are you talking about? You're saying that there is data showing that a child's long-term mental health is improved by castrating and sterilizing and mutilating him? Which data exactly?
Castrating, sterilizing, and mutilating him, right?
Is that? Where is that data? Can you cite it? See, Leslie Rutledge unfortunately never flips it around on him. He's very lucky that she never thinks to say, what are you talking about? Can you show me? What are you talking about? Can you provide an example? Can you say anything about it other than insisting that it exists? No, you can't, because it doesn't exist. It never has existed, and it never will. You're lying. Unfortunately for you, your guest didn't call you out on that. But I will, and I'd do it to your face if you had the courage to sit down with someone who won't be so easily railroaded. But in some ways, I'm grateful for the Jon Stewart episode. He's grateful for it because it's the first time anyone has paid attention to him in like 8 years. I'm grateful because it's being heralded as the best defense of gender ideology ever put to film, and yet it's laughably weak and can be
Who's heralded that? The best defense for gender ideology ever put to film, and he knows that the people who like Matt Walsh, who tune in to watch this drivel nonsense video, that they're not going to follow up on that. So he he wants all this he wants the data and all this stuff. Just a simple thing, your claims, he just makes wild claims.
dismantled with almost no effort at all. And that really tells you everything you need to know about gender ideology. If you want to join my...
Look at this doofus. All right. Look, I guess that's it. I'm going to probably try to watch the video again, 45K. You know, this is a real challenge. I want to take it seriously because I think we are at a crossroads in our understanding. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just leave it off with this. I'm gonna play this song, this new rap that I did called Birdie. Check it out after this. But before I go, I wanna point out how I come at this topic with energy sometimes, and I've had a friend ask, like, why is it so important to me in particular, you know? And I knew where that question came from. It came from a place of like, yo, you're not a member of that group, like, why do you? And so I think the first thing I would want to say is, to answer that question, why, I don't think I need to be a member of a group to understand the nature of their claims, particularly if they're true, particularly if they deal with the human condition. It might be through some work, but I've developed that capacity. I'm very glad that people have done that through history. Very glad that so many people came out and white people were included in voices seeking justice for George Floyd and his family. John Brown was one of the people helping and conspiring with people to get abolition of slavery. He understood that with a passion. There were lots of men in the women's movement and people who understand that we're all in this together. So I have a video called Love, Separation, and Kendrick Lamar. I talk a little bit deeper about some of my ideas on these separations, these notions of ourselves as different, these labels, these categories, these social categories, and how they play out, and from where they come in our minds, how they play out in our minds as we carve out the world. And so we can hold very hard, strong beliefs based on personal separations, that sometimes these separations come from innocuous places. They're not like entirely malicious, but then an event occurs and you observe the event through that lens, and then you have a pernicious manifestation, right? Because you've separated in a way. I think Matt Walsh is an example of this. The people who identify as non-binary people, they're not just that, they are complex, deeply complex. Just like Matt Walsh is, frankly, a complex person. But with his dreary style of dress and demeanor and his voice, vocal tone, he lets you know that he is a man, you know, and he wants you to engage with him as a man. All the assumptions are comfortable for him. He wants to be a knight. He wants to be a hero. He wants to be chivalrous. He wants to be a man. It works for him, you know, but he doesn't have the empathy to realize that there are people just like him who have a different expression and a different mood, a different internal composition, whether it's, I don't know, biological, chemical, social. It's like as they express and move through this world, they want to be engaged with in a way that is unique and specific to them, and the best you can do is to engage and develop that understanding of them through that experience, rather than to, oh man, woman, that's what's going on here. It's not about biology. Male people are not attempting to be female. Female people are not attempting to be male. But there are people trying to access a different mode of assumptions in the social space, because as I see it, gender is an overlay, an interface that has been overlaid over our experience with each other as beings in this consciousness. And it gives us it's a social categorization that comes with assumptions and requirements. And some of us are fine with them, some of us are unfine. It's very fluid. It's obviously fluid. It's been fluid through history. It's fluid between people and in people. It's fluid. It's all one thing. So I'm gonna leave it there, yo. And I'm gonna leave it there, and I'm gonna leave you with this, y'all. Where am I? Peace. Yo, it's just my thoughts, yo. When you got real demons, it makes you run faster. I done mastered that lame shit that y'all lust after. I step into my shadow enemy chapter. It might be too late to be acting friendly after. I plan it all out with menacing laughter. Never wasting my energy with penalties fractured. Focus to see my vision improve. I'm a lens crafter. Now I set the tone for the shit when I used to bend backwards. I'm like a Zen master. We playing chess, okay, I'm playing chess faster. Funny, I just hacked your best password. A clever bastard. Take a breath. Cause your next words might be your last words. This nigga rapping now, but he already got his masters. Show him respect like you show your pastors. But this ain't that. Let me clarify that last verse. I believe that we create divine through the lessons of past hurts. And that's the essence of this whole blessing the path works. God is a queer black woman among us, this last earth. It's really not a good look with all of this cash first. You really not pro-life when you fight in a mass birth. You confident, but you don't do the math first. You think you got the gist, but you missed the diasporas. Please shut the fuck up, listen and ask first. You an incel with no intel on how an ass works.